Well, it goes without saying that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most pivotal figures in American history, easily ranking, I'd say, with Lincoln and Jefferson and Roosevelt. He effected a social change that was monumental and without prompting a civil war, which in itself is rather extraordinary. I think what is perhaps less well known is that King is also a model for our time. He remains an important archetype for our own discussion of the political and moral situation. There are three areas I want to focus on with King. The first one is nonviolence. The second one is the way he found to bring religious discourse into the public arena, which is very deft, I think. And lastly, his use of language, those three elements. First of all, nonviolence. I know I've spoken about nonviolence before, but it's such an important theme, I think. King was a student of Gandhi, as we know. He studied Gandhi's campaigns in India, but also he was a Christian preacher, so he knew firsthand the great text of the Sermon on the Mount about loving your enemy, turn the other cheek. He realized the two classic responses to violence, fight or flight, are sometimes all you can do, but in the long run, neither one works very well. You fight fire with fire, you make the world hotter, more violent. You acquiesce to violence, you tend to confirm the violent person in his violence. What he saw in Gandhi's campaigns and what he saw in Matthew was, there's a third way, call it provocative nonviolence, which is not acquiescence to injustice, not just caving in, but turning the other cheek. Someone strikes you on the right cheek, you should turn and give them the other, meaning you should stand your ground and in a provocative but nonviolent way, signal to the aggressor, I refuse to share the assumptions that are motivating you. I refuse to live in the same moral and spiritual world that you're living in. At the same time, you mirror back to the violent person his violence, that he might see it and be brought to change. King got all that. And what he did now in his own campaigns in America in the late 50s and 60s, sending his followers to sit at segregated lunch counters, to march on Selma, to endure water cannons and attack dogs, to endure, in extreme cases, even death. What that was active, provocative nonviolence, which had the effect that he wanted, namely that it mirrored back to a violent America, a racist America, its own dysfunction. But also it gummed up the works, if you want. It got in the system of this dysfunctional arrangement and thereby brought it to a halt. And that's the great lesson. One of the most effective agents of social change in our country's history was a Christian who was using precisely Christian methods to do it. I felt for a long time in our churches, in our parishes, in our Christian communities, we ought to be training armies of people who understand this dynamic. My fear is that we still look at nonviolence as this kind of, airy-fairy, woolly abstraction, some weird idealism. It is not that. It's a very pragmatic strategy. King knew how to use it. We should train all kinds of people in the Christian world today how to use it. Second thing about King I think we can really learn from is the way he brought religious language into the public forum. The etiquette, as you know, of modern societies is that you privatize religion. It's okay to be religious as long as you keep it to yourself and your little community, but the public realm should remain sort of religiously neutral. Okay. Martin Luther King was first and foremost a Christian preacher. His base was the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. He was someone who occupied that pulpit and spoke out of the Christian scriptures. No one doubts that. At the same time, he knew he had to bring those Christian convictions into the public space and had to do it in a way that would be persuasive to a wider audience. And part of his genius was he found a way to do it. Probably the best example would be his greatest bit of public oratory, namely the I Have a Dream speech. In that speech, it's not a sermon, not given in a church, it was given in a public place, namely in Washington on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He calls on Isaiah. Every valley shall be exalted, every hill made low, and the crooked ways made straight, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed. Okay, explicit biblical language. But then, he very cleverly linked it to American civil language. He saw that that Isaiah dream was congruent with the American dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal or endowed by the Creator, etc., etc. He linked in that public place Isaiah and the Declaration of Independence. He linked Isaiah and Jefferson, and in the public place found room for religious discourse. There's a kind of liberalism you can see today which is explicitly anti-religious, that wants to exclude religion from the public conversation. King is the opponent of that. He was the proponent, if you want, of a kind of liberalism that said, no, you don't have to exclude religion from the public place, but you don't have to bring it in violently either. You can find a way to bring the points of contact together and thereby bring religion persuasively and nonviolently into the public arena. I would say, may his tribe increase. May we find more and more Christians who have that deft capacity to bring these two worlds together. The last thing about King I want to emphasize is simply his use of language. When I was a little kid, so he died in 1968, so I would have seen film of him when I was a little kid. But then, of course, since his death, I've watched him many times. And what you notice about King when he speaks is he's singing much more than speaking. When he orates, it's like a great opera singer. The words are elongated, and it's much more of a rhythmic, lyrical style. And then you realize how appropriate that is, given the language he used. The language he used was not just full of good ideas. It was full of verve and rhythm and rhyme and energy and passion. He was in line there with the ancient rhetoricians who were convinced as much by the musical elements of language as we are by the ideas that they bear. Just a couple of examples from King's wonderful orations. This one: the arm of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. Say that I was a drum major for righteousness. Wonderful. I mean, the rhythm and the balance and the excitement of that language. And then from the I Have a Dream speech: let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. Rhythm, rhyme, alliteration. What's carrying people along is not just the idea here, which is very powerful, but it's the very musicality and rhythm and beauty of the language that he's chosen. Again, I would like an army of Christians to arise who know how to use language that way. We say at the heart of our tradition that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus Christ is the Word. We've always reverenced words and their power and their beauty and their lyricism. There should be a whole community of Christians who are trained as King was in that very provocative and effective use of language. Martin Luther King obviously was not a saint. I'm not recommending his canonization, but I do think that in these three ways, he's a very powerful model for all those today who want to light a fire on the earth.